impairments or another phenomenon. So how do you explain this? You ask this observation that we make this kind of a connection.
See, when you talk of teaser rates, what is a teaser rate in India? The teaser rate in India was a product where you initially offer loans at a lower interest rate with an understanding that at the end of 3 years interest rates will go higher. Now we ourselves had a product like that. How did we have a product like that? We had at that time in 2010 a very steep yield curve. I think it's very important to understand how the yield curve is structured. So we had a very steep yield curve. Now when you have a very steep yield curve, what we did is we borrowed money at the high end market, which means we borrowed money for let's say 7 years or 10 years, which was expensive. And then because of the steepness of the yield curve, we could swap that money into a product where for 2 years or 3 years the interest cost was fixed. So because the interest cost was fixed, the interest and the 1 year, 2 year rates were very low, we could borrow money at very low interest rates, and that enabled us to give fixed rate loans to customers also at a low rate. So whilst the terminology teaser rate might give people a feeling that something is wrong, in reality the spreads were pretty well protected. It was just an additional product that could be offered in the market, taking advantage of the fact that we had a very steep yield curve. If you observe post-2010, the yield curve in India had got flatter and flatter, and there was a very long and sustained period of time in 2011 when the yield curve actually inverted, which means long-term borrowing was at a lower cost than short-term borrowing. Short-term borrowing was more expensive than long-term borrowing. And that is really a recipe for financial. If that was to sustain for a long period of time in any economy, it would destroy that economy, because it means that there is no investment happening, there is no long-term growth that is happening. So every government must try to strive to create a long-term yield curve which is positive and not inverted. But coming back to your question, so it was not a share, not a desire to gain market share which created this so-called teaser rate loan product, but just the fact that market conditions were such that one could raise money and offer a low interest rate to customers for 2 or 3 years, and whilst appraising the customer, you would take into account a higher rate that you would have to pay in future. See, the reason why a lower interest rate in the initial years makes sense is because when someone is buying a house, straight away there is a period of time when he's living in a rented property and he's buying a house. So he's paying a rent on his property, and therefore in those initial 1 or 2 years, it is good to have a product where the outflows are lesser because it benefits the individual. By the end of 2 years, he has moved into the new property, he doesn't have to pay rent anymore, his income has gone higher, and therefore he can service higher loan. Now as far as prepayment is concerned, I think that has been a bit of a misnomer. That was more something which was created by the regulators. I still don't see the sanctity of removal of prepayment charges, because it creates a little bit of, in my view, in a long-term perspective, it creates a little imbalance in the asset liability management of a bank. And therefore the withdrawal of prepayment charges is not, in my personal view, it might be a very customer-friendly thing, but it's not something which will strengthen the banking system.
No, but one might be what about the
low cost
housing? One of the factors that we have, if we look at the income of in India, people who are salaried class, the offering sector is a very, very strong percentage. Large number of people are either self-employed or they are done on this income, therefore is not. Now when you are facing that kind of market situation, you would not take loans to these people who want to be salaried. And that is one of the reasons why a large number of people are taken. Secondly, the main impact of the reason why people are trying to manage market share.
See, if you talk of you talk of 2 classes. One is self-employed borrowers, and 2 is people with self-employed borrowers who are not able who may have the income but are not able to demonstrate the quantum of income they have because they are not paying the taxes and they are not filing the tax returns. Effectively, that's what it is.
It's not regular also.
Yeah, but you can also, it may not be every month, but it is reasonably envisageable. So I think for that there are enough lenders, there are enough people in the market who look at who are self-employed borrowers. For example, we know that lots of doctors, chartered accountants, lawyers don't necessarily pay all their taxes. And when they file their return, they don't disclose their entire income in the tax returns. You know, there's this very interesting concept that someone talked about of giving loans to someone who was selling some product on the road, badaras on the road. And we actually had a field credit person who went, waited there for a whole day to see how many people were consuming that product, that thing he was selling. And on that basis, they worked backwards to estimate what his income would be, and then were able to give a loan to them. Now, it's not that these loans are unsafe. These loans are equally safe. So there are enough number of lenders who will give loans to these kind of people. But obviously, the risks are higher, and therefore the interest rate has to be higher. So you can't expect that the interest rate that a customer who's working in a company, paying all his taxes, very clean accounts, steady income, the interest rate he pays will be the same as the interest rate being paid by this fellow who was selling. So interest rate differential will be there. But there are products too, and there are people who would take loans for this.
Yeah. So in view of the trend in property prices and the interest rate direction that you are seeing, and the fact that currently the financial assets are yielding a negative realized return, would it make sense for young investors to go and invest in property by taking leverage as a means of wealth creation? Because fixed income or financial assets are not really giving that kind of a good return.
I have never advised people to borrow money to invest in. I don't, in my personal, and this is purely a personal view, I would never borrow money. First of all, I would not borrow money, first of all. Forget about it, or whatever. But that apart, if one was to borrow money and you want to create an asset where you want to stay, then one can expect it, one can sort of accept it. But if you want to borrow money to create an asset on which you expect to create in future and make money, I would definitely not recommend it.
Okay, I think
thank you very much, sir, for sharing your valuable insights with us. Those were really words of wisdom and inspiration, especially for showing confidence in our generation. It indeed was a precious learning as to how housing acts as a core of the economy and the modus operandi of the subprime crisis, and how something like that would never hit our economy. I would now request Dr. Bhavesh Patel, Dean AMSoM, to offer words of gratitude.
Shri Keki Mistry, Vice Chairman and CEO of HDFC, the Praful Bhai, Amrut, the Directors of the institution, AMSoM Registrar, the invited guests, my faculty colleagues and students. I know at 1 o'clock when we close, nobody has the patience to listen to the Thanksgiving. But this is a pious duty that I have to perform. After such a wonderful speech, which was so much academic in nature, at the same time analytical also about the practical events that have happened, and also explaining how India has remained immune to a subprime fiasco, and also charting a very rosy picture about the future of India in terms of the overall economic giant as well as the housing sector, and enlightening the students about the issue as well as challenging them. The future is in your hand. I think this was very, very enriching experience for all of us. Being a finance student, I really thoroughly enjoyed every moment that I could not stop but pick up the pencil and jot down some notes. For the audience, I'll mention that those notes were actually notes taken from his speech. It was not that I was preparing my Thanksgiving or thanks there. Sir, we really enjoyed the analysis and could relate the theory. I'm sure some of my students would have related with the theory that they have been studying, and also the faculty members. Many times, especially when the election shoutings are over and when there is a, say, blame game on the parties, it brings the demotivating effects, especially on the youngsters. And I think despite that, it is very interesting to learn that despite all the political dirt around, the regulators and our businesses have been doing a wonderful job in India, and that gives lots of hopes to us. So thanks a lot, Shri Keki Mistry, for your enlightening speech. I also will take an opportunity here to thank Praful Bhai as well as Professor Kalro to conceive this idea that each school should have one annual lecture. And we thought about the name, and as Praful mentioned, that we came to a conclusion, a consensus pretty quickly that who should be the first person, so that becomes a talk. It becomes a benchmark for us when we set the second, third, and nth number of annual lecture. I must also thank the event team. It's a big team. I'm not able to take the names of everybody. Because in that case I might forget few names and it will be unfair to them. It's a big event team that has really worked together, and so many people have helped them, including the students, volunteers. I really would like to thank them for the meticulous details that they have taken care of. And especially thanks to all the guests who could spare time, come over here and encourage us, and also to all the students. I hope this lecture is exciting and also challenging the students. So thank you everybody.